This episode is brought to you by Nebraska Code 2025. Check out their website now for tickets, agendas, and more. I hope to see you there.
I absolutely think that, models are something that should be owned by labor, or in the processes that create them. And, we don't see this yet. And maybe this is like find a solution for the blockchain or whatever things are out there. But how do we make sure, John Clancy wrote a bunch of books and we use it in the corpus of things. And so now our model knows how to write books in the style of John Clancy without attributing or paying for John Clancy, right? And I think that's kind of like a really negative anti-pattern, because now anyone who's in information work or creative work hates AI reflexively because they've shown no possible future for these people. And they publish these things that are like good enough, but not pleasurable, not like creative and interesting and dynamic. It's just kind of like, they resemble art like McDonald's resembles food.
Welcome to the next episode of Engineer in the Loop, the podcast for professionals working with models in the mix.
We are going to have a Brian-less episode today, but fear not, we have special guest Peter Swimm, founder of Toyleville, builder and deployer of conversational AI agents. How's it going?
Yeah, going great. Thanks for having me, Alec.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. So how did you kind of get into tech? I know conversational agents is like a lot of the hot newness right now, but give us a little bit of your background. How'd you get into technology to begin with?
So I've been in tech since the 90s. So, and when I say that, it's like I'm probably just old enough to be the last analog generation of people. My first job in high school was they got a grant from the Clinton administration at the library system in Chicago to train people how to use the internet. And the internet was like how we are talking about AI today, where it's just like, oh yeah, everyone's got the internet. And so all these libraries threw away their old dumb terminal computers and put modern computers on it connected to the internet. And no one knew how to use it. And so they hired a bunch of teams as a summer program to train the community how to do it. And I think that is kind of still what I'm doing today, because it's like, there's people and, seniors and young people, all kinds of people at public libraries who have ideas of what they want to do. And they think the internet was a good resource for them to use, but they didn't know what to use and they didn't know how to start. So that kind of like the very, Spider-Man origin story kind of experience for me in my head. And throughout the years, I've been working for different tech companies. I didn't complete a 4-year college thing. I was never really interested in college, and I was just busy working. I was working for network operation centers and then large corporate entities and then startups. And eventually I started to get into the concept about 10 years ago of conversational AI. And what conversational AI does is it kind of democratizes technology for people, because everyone knows how to communicate for the most part. They know how to talk and say their ideas and their expressions and what they want to do. Conversational AI from the very beginning was about transforming intentions to action. And so I found it really a natural fit for my background and my interest. And I started with a company that was a day one supporter of the Slack APIs. And Slack arguably is useless without conversational AI other than a social network. And it really kind of opened my eyes to the hundreds of possibilities of using little conversational agents and things to help work in life and all that stuff. So that's what I've been doing for the past 12 years now. And in the last year, I decided to kind of start my own consultancy because, I was building tools and products for people to build stuff, but not a lot of people understand the art and science of making something that's both personable and technologically sophisticated. And I found a lot of demand for just people to come through and force whisper people into this new future.
It's super interesting because I was looking at your experience, you've done some work at some pretty big companies that everybody would know just looking at your resume. And it's weird, I think at the enterprise level, a lot of people understand conversational AI is how they work. But to your point of I joke around, my wife tells people I do stuff with AI, whatever that means. But it's there's all of this different toil, which I think it's funnier how you named your company.
Yeah.
Just stupid stuff that people don't need to do. But when you're a small, medium business, you're so far in the weeds, you don't have necessarily the bandwidth or time to take a step back and look and be well, is this thing I'm doing or have been doing even providing value? I'm just doing it because it's what I do here and,
right.
Help elevate you to the higher level. how do you kind of approach those conversations or help people realize that like, hey, you're getting stuck in the toil and not necessarily providing
Yeah.
value to the business?
Yeah. Like, I mean, it's really interesting. Even when you get to the enterprise level, there's like entire cycles of business that boil down to a really smart person keeping track of stuff in an Excel, you know. And so like a lot of the
Yeah.
meeting preparation was, okay, we need to turn the Excel into a PowerPoint so we can present to so and so, and they expect to see a video. So now we need to turn the PowerPoint into a video, and now we need to turn that PowerPoint into agile tickets. And like there's all these things that are like socially around the concept of work and what work is and what work does. And I think a lot of things get done despite that. Like people are like, okay, Alec, you are the glue that holds me together in a way that we can't really measure. And the first thing I do when I talk to people about AI is that when you're onboarding to an AI platform, you're not hiring anyone. You're not getting anything free. You're taking everything that your people do and building an exoskeleton suit around it and making them have more reach and more, availability and have more time to do things that are very hard to do because your business is being run out of an Excel spreadsheet, right? And you
Hmm.
need to like get better about these things, and you need to like take the people who are like your lifeblood and really smart people and free them up to like do things that are not tied up in all this procedural junk. And that's kind of different to what AI people are selling, because they're selling AI credits and they want you to use AI to solve everything. And there's a lot of solutions that are just like, maybe it's a cron job, right? Maybe if we can use AI to set up a cron job for a person who doesn't understand how cron works, maybe that's like
Hmm.
enough for like 30% of the problem. And it's not something you have to do a very expensive API logic thing. When all you need to do is like, oh, when the meter goes red, reboot the server, kind of operations and stuff like that. There's like a lot of like I said, my clients, I think the biggest thing we do is one, let's lock it down. Let's understand like, what data we're giving it and what autonomy we give it and be able to measure and control that. And then we understand like what work are we trying to do? And that's a hard question for companies because they're too busy doing the work to really understand like, oh, what do I do every morning to check my inbox and get into work and all that junk. And then it becomes kind of philosophical for a lot of clients because they've never like had that moment to really like consider what they're doing because they've been so focused on deliverables that the whole meta concept of work kind of escaped their planning.
Right. We're so busy in the weeds and the toil of we don't think of like what should we actually be doing to help with the bottom line or, moving the company forward or helping our competitive advantage.
Yeah. And a lot of that came about my experience of working product for companies where, the most amazing thing is when you have strangers do the software you've been working on for 6 months and you see it and it's like a dog putting a mouse in its mouth and just like, you don't understand like how people work and how they can do things. I have a relative and I love her very dearly, but she doesn't use shift on the keyboard. She caps locks on and off for every time she needs to capitalize stuff. And it blew my mind the first time I saw it. And I'm just like, that's in it. That's her muscle memory. Like the pop. No one's going to take away caps lock. So sure, as long as she doesn't leave it on all the time, whatever. And I think there's a lot of things like that where people use technology where there's the right way and the wrong way. And I think AI technology is very quickly to say, oh, you're doing it the wrong way when it doesn't work right. But like, what is the wrong way for things that are like based on the corpus of human understanding? And I think people's competitive advantage is like smaller companies who are able to like figure out the right way and the wrong way to do things quicker than big companies. So a lot of my time I talk to like, we want to like 500-person company. We want to find out, what is about you guys that makes you a better company than the Microsofts and Amazons of the world. And a lot of it is the people, right? And it's like how you work on stuff and how you decide stuff. And so let's use AI to support that versus like, advocating the cool stuff to the machine and people just do the work you can't automate.
Yeah. And I think that's sometimes the hardest or like the non super in your face thing. Like I'm working with a client right now and they're a global client and we're like, we're just going to use Microsoft has off the shelf doc translation and video translation. Could I put that through an LLM and do all of that? Which, I mean, you could argue it is like, but like Chat GPT, sure, that'd be cooler, sexier, more on trend or whatever. But it's like, why would I do that when these other APIs and services are already here for much cheaper? And then
Mm.
our solution's super simple, right? Like you go to the Azure portal and you do the thing, or you make an API call and you do the thing. Like you have a
Mhm.
box that calls an API, you get the response when it's done. And it's like, could we have built a cool, crazy multi-agent architecture thing that, MCP servers and all the buzzwords. Yes. At the end of the day, did all the business need to translate their content? Yeah. They don't care about all that other crap that, is going to add time, complexity, all that other stuff. And I think that's sometimes where I feel like right now we had the big AI hype. People were super excited about it. A bunch of companies came off the hype, were disillusioned by it a little bit. And now we're at the point where people are finally starting to say, like, all right, you need to justify it. Like blank checks for AI aren't going to be a thing anymore.
Yeah.
And trying to figure out what those use cases are. Because I think some people still view AI as just magic, which to be fair to a lot of people it is. But trying to say like, here's where it is today. Here's what we can do. Here's where we're trending. How do we work that out so then we provide value to the business?
Well, I have this joke about like Microsoft has a product line called Surface Pro, and I think AI are all a bunch of Surface Pros. In that, like I worked on a product that leveraged those AI translation services, and so I did very deep analysis across all the languages, and for the 8 major business languages in the world, they did great. And then as you get into other countries and different things, the quality is wildly uneven. And I think that speaks to like everything that works in AI works really well. And for the things they don't consider important, it works not well or not at all, right? And I think the reason of that is that the way modern like LLMs are based on is kind of about the oppression of the majority. And so
Hmm.
like if you have a business case that is like requires personalization, and personalization meaning like I'm a different person than everyone else, like I'm in tech and I have not graduated from a major college or university. So I get different recruiting responses than like someone else who went to Stanford and all that. And so if AI is picking people for job roles, they would overlook a person like me and pick someone who more closely aligns to the buckets and the slots and the chicken machine. And I think that kind of like maybe that's fine for a big company because you're processing thousands of things at once, and it's okay that you're only 69% big. But like if you're a small company, you're throwing away 40% of your opportunity because AI is not equipped to like come up with interesting things or show you the data of the outliers and all that. That a person who has the autonomy to steer a smaller ship a certain way, you're missing out on a lot of stuff. So I think, you know, if you want to solve a problem quickly, AI, yeah, sure, AI can translate to every language. You're going to have interactions that are weird. And if you're like saying, okay, well, this is low stakes enough that I'm okay with 69% good versus like sending an XML to a translation service and having a person translate it so it's 100% right all the time. And then it's free after that point. You know, it's kind of like the rent or buy kind of argument too, right? Because it's like, if I want to make things dynamic and always be beholden to the API forever, yeah, it's cheaper in the first 3 months, but what about over 10 years, you know, or whatever your product cycle is. So I think a lot of the AI adoptions are kind of short sighted in that regard, where it's just like, yeah, it the demo worked, let's ship it. We can ship the demo in 2 weeks. We're live in production. Oh no, here's all these problems. How do we fix it? And the AI people are like, I don't know. You know, like there's like a lot of stuff that's like, okay, I can use RAG and I can use prompt, and then at the end of the day, you have so many like rules based things on top of your AI, and you're like, what am I even using AI for anymore? I could have built a
Yeah,
rules engine.
this could just be a deterministic rules engine at this point. Like,
Right.
I think the other thing people overlook, specifically about the case you were talking about, like our client sends it off to a person. They've had experiences where the people are wrong. Like
Mm,
people want to look at AI as in like people are always 100% correct. Like we as humans make mistakes. And I think when you're, depending on your system and your equation, right? If you already know there's going to be a level of variability depending on where, what human is doing your thing or whatnot, it's like, I don't think it's a crazy business decision to go, well, humans right, let's say 90% of the time. AI is right
mm,
80% of the time, but we get it back immediately. There is you know, a value to speed. And it's like, okay, well, do we put something out there knowing it's 80% correct? And then, that last 10%, we maybe wait for somebody as a human to validate, which is also
yeah.
cheaper and easier than doing something from scratch. So I
Yeah.
think there's a whole equation there that's interesting. I also you commented on like big companies. I think Scott Hanselman at one point commented, somebody asked him, how do you stand out on a Microsoft application? And he
Mm,
basically was like, granted, this was like 2 or 3 months ago, I think at this point, but he made some comment on a podcast. I think they got like 10 or somewhere between 10 to 50,000 applications. And he's like, I don't think you can. And to
yeah.
your point, when you're trying to parse 50,000 applications and be 100% non-bias or anything. You need tools there, or you're just going to like completely not even look at people. You don't have time in the day for somebody to go through 50,000 applications for one job. So you're going
Yeah.
to put some very high level filters that unfortunately, like, you're going to get filtered out. They'll look at me and be like, you don't have X years of experience. You're filtered out immediately. It doesn't matter if it's
Right.
relevant or not. Or you don't have a master's degree. You're filtered out. Whatever arbitrary thing they're doing. And to your point, if you're a scale like Microsoft, maybe that's okay because whatever you're remaining with is still quality candidates. If you're mom and pop consulting and you get 10 candidates and you're filtering out most of them, like, you might be filtering out the cream of the crop.
Right. Or you might be filtering out like the diamond in the rough, right? The
Yeah.
person who needs a opportunity and who's going to run with it in a way that a person who maybe is like used to being the cream of the crop doesn't. I think like my transformative experiences, I started working for a startup in 2006, and I was employee number 5, and I was like maybe one of 3 employees left when it got acquired. And my transformation from the beginning of that to the end of that was tremendous because I was a low-level employee, but my desk was next to the CEO's desk. So I osmotically absorbed all this information and stuff that was, I think, way better to me than a college degree and all that because, I understood things like finance and becoming a product person and understands economic realities and technical realities and customer service realities because we all sit in the same and breathe the same air was like super helpful. And that's the thing that the risk of like if you AI automate everything is that all that ambient osmosis that you get from just like being in a team of smart people saying cool stuff on phone calls goes away, right? And maybe that's really useful to an enterprise like Microsoft or Amazon because they're looking. I need a level 36 engineer to do the software project because numbers show that person can ship in 6 weeks, and I don't
Mhm.
really care anything else about that person. I don't know. I don't care. That person just is like, it's like buying CPU. It's like you're buying capacity. You're buying capacity to do work. And I think that's why kind of AI is so attractive to like tech leaders and stuff because the ability to like spin up expertise the same way you spin up cloud services is super compelling. And I think that's just kind of like a surface for like mediocrity because again, you're just going to generate things that are done before. And there's some things you don't need innovation on, like right, like I don't need innovation on like checking my software for typos and stuff like that, or but like I come from a creative writing background actually, and I was going to school for writing before I moved on, and it's like in business, plagiarism is so entrenched and part of the thing, and like I've seen so many of like my PowerPoints and stuff end up in big slides by CEOs without attribution, and that's just like the way it went, right? And I think that is kind of also why people are so like enamored of this thing because they mistake uh, having a smart team with, oh, the information is just out there and I just weave it together and I'm the smartest person because I curate those things. It doesn't matter who makes it.
Mhm.
And so that's a lot of the stuff that I talk about, um, my clients is kind of understanding how things are made and how you get attribution back and the workers come up with good stuff and you make them engage in the work and AI is kind of an opportunity to like stitch things together and leverage all the work you're doing in your company without duplication and also like making sure that like team X is known as the standard bearer of this product and all that. So it's kind of like a counter purpose to the marketing, and I think a lot of people who've had success have been the people who've been able to kind of like dive between those two things that seem to be at odds and like makes them work together.
That's real interesting because I think in the world of AI, a lot of people are looking at it and totally correct me if I'm putting words in your mouth, but a lot of people are looking at it for either more efficiency or cutting down on the, cost of doing things.
Yeah.
You're looking at it kind of as like a retention thing as well of like, hey, Peter, you did a great job doing this thing, like, or your team did a great job doing this thing. Like, I don't really care that AI helped you. You, the person, still did this.
No, and I think that's a really great point. Like I think like especially if you're into the process of making company models and building on the work that people are doing, and I
Mhm.
absolutely think that like models are something that should be owned by labor, or in the processes that create them. And we don't see this yet, and maybe this is like find a solution for the blockchain or whatever things are out there. But how do we make sure like okay, John Clancy wrote a bunch of books and and we use it in the corpus of things and So now our model knows how to write books in the style of John Clancy without attributing or paying for John Clancy, right? And I think that's kind of like a really negative anti-pattern because now anyone who's in information work or creative work hates AI reflexively because they've shown no possible future for these people. And they publish these things that are like good enough, but like not pleasurable, not like creative and interesting and dynamic. It's just kind of like, you know, they resemble art like McDonald's resembles food. And, and I think that's the wrong way to do it. Like I think like I use AI a lot personally, like I have ADHD. It's hard for me to write outlines. It's hard for me to make sure my opinion is structured properly. So I use it to write the first draft and then I write because it's easier to edit than it was to write. So I avoid like page syndrome. I use it for my code projects. So like, okay, scaffold me up an environment so I can get everything set up and and then I can write the new code, and a Copilot checks my syntax and make sure I don't have any security issues and all that. It's just super helpful for me in that regard. Like R2D2 and Luke Skywalker going to the X-wing, and Luke is just focusing on getting the shot, and R2D2 is like making sure the ship has oxygen and it's like not getting shot at and stuff. And I think that is kind of like the future I want. Like I don't want like a droid fleet. I want to have like experts doing an incredible human feats of excellence, and the machines just tagging along and reflects my value and ethics and approaches to work.
Yeah, that's super interesting because I think it then, like, you even think of like the research area, right? Like, I think Microsoft at Build announced a new way to cool servers that because they just allowed AI to run off and do a bunch of just like sample stuff. And then when it found a likely outcome, a human actually did the experiment and it just got rid of a lot of the toil, a lot of the results. And then a human could do the thing the human does, where it's like, compounding a new compound and testing the thing out, making sure it works in the real world. And I think that is a super cool use case because it's kind of like you said, right? You have R2D2 running the magnitude of just keeping the ship stable, keeping it going forward, keeping the engines from using the right fuel, like all these things that when you're on autopilot or like fly-by-wire kind of systems do today, you're like, yeah, you have an agent that does that. And then you get to focus on the fine-tuning things like we have right now with planes, right? The pilots are mostly in charge of taking off and landing. The rest of the flight, unless something goes wrong, they're kind of just passengers like the rest of us, right? Like autopilot and fly-by-wire is a thing. They're just like, eh. But I think it's really cool to see. I think it's hard to see how that would work into, a cognitive workload because I think people are just you're basically asking people to imagine something that's never existed before, right? Like the mechanical automation of flying a plane is something easy to see. People know how cruise control works. They know how like lane assist works. Like they've seen these examples, and now we're actually telling people like, hey, think of something you've never thought of before and like a work thing that's a pain for you. And maybe I can automate it. If not, make less steps for you to do.
Right. I mean, yeah, and I think like there's certain things like some people abhor the idea of doing collaboration with machine. And they give a lot of personal passion from doing things with technology on their own, and that's fine, right? Like I don't think anyone should be forced to use these tools and technologies. But I also think like it's an accessibility issue. Like it's a neurodiversity issue where like some people are gonna really be unlocked. They're gonna become, a gray C coder who has a hard time reviewing his or her own work because their ADHD overlooks things. And if they have an AI system that points things out as they're writing, they're able to like use their left brain thinking and not be hindered by their neuroplasticity and diversity and all that. Like I think that is like that's a super good outcome to me. Like more people are allowed to like be participating in the systems because like I have the worst handwriting in the world, right? Like if I had to like handwrite to a visit, it looks like a ransom note, right? Because the computers, I'm able to type and look like a normal person, and they don't look like, I want $1 million, or you'll never see the artist again, kind of stuff. And I think that goes for a lot of people, where it's just like, freeing the brain to be good at what it does and in the level it needs to be at too. So
yeah, I think that's really interesting, just how machines help with different things like that. I'm kind of curious. So when you work with your clients, you kind of touched on this a little bit. Are you helping automate processes they have today, or are you going as far as even like fine tuning some models so they have their own like enterprise, like I don't know, like gas station Inc. chat
yeah,
LLM or
I think there's a realm of everything, right? Because the holy cycle of it is either I need just in time information, right? or any just-in-time abilities or any just-in-time reasoning between the information I have and the abilities I have to have a solution that solves something we haven't solved before. So like the simplest thing that we do is like FAQ bots, right? Like you could hook up a bot to your directory of documents and company documents, and a person could talk to that. So that's great. You can like, instead of having to call the HR person with every single little question now, I could just talk to the HR person's public documents, and RTFM becomes self-serving. But then we get into things where it's like, okay, now we need, okay, person understands how this thing works, but they need help in doing something. And that's, putting AI against APIs and processes and stuff. How do we like facilitate that? And finally, we're getting to like this reasoning thing that is like, I think essential for OpenAI to become a real company and Microsoft to like success at this is where you are able to extrapolate decisions and results based on information and desire of the person running the system and all that. And I think that's where we're kind of running to the weeds, right? Because I don't think companies have like the history of capitalism and companies is like you have the leader and then people all down the chain either making decisions or kicking up the chain to someone who can make a decision. Right? And I think like there's a kind of myopia at the top that like they're the most important piece of the puzzle, and there's a myopia at the bottom that they actually know more than everyone else, and I think there's degrees of difference along the way. Um, so a lot of the stuff I do with customers is we just fundamentally got to talk about how do we do work, and it's like not what people think they're signing up for. They think they're like, I just want to get people Copilot to write stuff. I'm like, cool. We'll turn everything off and you'll just do the knowledge search and you'll do like Copilot help me make a PowerPoint for the presentation kind of stuff. And we'll save this stuff for someone else because I don't want to pay Microsoft for the privilege of being their beta tester because the stuff isn't ready for us or whatever. So I think a lot of that is just kind of like, it's a lot of like, okay, we're going to buy you a car, but also you're going to learn a little bit about car maintenance and how to buy the next car and all that stuff. And hopefully when they come out of their engagement that they're kind of more informed as a consumer and as a builder of these tools of what are like the slam dunk use cases and what are the things that are a little sci-fi and what's the risk if I use these or not in my company.
Interesting. Yeah, I think those are all great points to try to send home because I think a lot of people are buying snake oil, and a lot of companies you see popping up all over the place, they're like just one step ahead of Microsoft. So you like talk about beta tests, but it's like a beta test with slightly a better prompt than what Microsoft has. Like chat with your documents was one I saw when OpenAI announced their APIs. Like there was companies galore, and you're like, guys, you can build that in 10 minutes. Like, what are you like? Microsoft even had samples out there. So if you wanted to just spin up your own, you can do that instead of paying a company, millions of dollars to do the same exact thing on top of, then they also charge you for tokens too. So it's like,
Right.
Knowing what's sci-fi, what's easily doable, all that. Go ahead, sorry.
And the thing that OpenAI isn't selling you is the thing you really need, which is like, how do we keep which docs going out to the right people stuff, right? Like how do we have SharePoint, And
Yeah.
Microsoft's like, well, we have SharePoint. And so they spent 18 months of their lead time with OpenAI just hardening SharePoint. And so, which great, like if you're a Microsoft customer, you have all these things for free. So now at least you can hook ChatGPT up to it if you use Microsoft version of it. And like at least you won't have the CFO's documents go out to the public website chatbot, and that's kind of stuff that like startups, the break fast mentality can kind of like overlook. But for enterprise, there's all kinds of like the toughest customer in the world for Copilot. When I was working in Copilot Studio with Microsoft IT team, they did not allow anything. You couldn't even use the product itself as a Microsoft employee for 18 months, the first year of the thing, unless you have like the CFO himself, this CSO give you a special permission because it was just like they understood more than anyone the risk of running these organizations. And the dog piece of the way that should raise kind of alarms with people like companies and all that. But now I think that problem is largely settled as long as you are drinking the Microsoft Kool-Aid 100%, you can by default do safe things. OpenAI is not interested in that at all, really, because they're trying to become profitable. And make everyone else richer than they already are.
Yeah, and Microsoft you saw in the market too, like a bunch of people got scared. I think Samsung was one of the early leaks of ChatGPT of their language. Their code was getting dumped back out by the model. Microsoft has whole pages dedicated now on security and data privacy and all that. I would assume that part of that was driven internally too by Microsoft's own security team
Mm,
of like, hey, what do we need to feel comfortable using this? Cool, now let's publish it for the rest of the world because we don't want that to happen. There's going to be at least a handful of big enterprises that feel the same way.
yeah.
Eat their own dog
Yeah.
food, kind of.
Yeah. And, and it's like, as a product owner, when you go in these meetings and you get told all these things of like what you got to do, and you're like, your KPI as a product owner is to ship the product and get lots of adoption. But you also
Mhm,
realize that like it's never going to happen unless you get the IT guy to sign off on it being an enterprise. They won't even be able to try it, And so
mhm.
there's that friction, I think, of just like ship fast and win in the AI space, like, Microsoft projects and tech projects. I worked at Walmart for a little bit, and it would take, the onboarding new technology took 18 months because of all the security checkpoints and compliances and all the stuff you had to do, sign off and investigation. Like that would be like 18 AI model cycles,
Right.
in this current state. So, it's very hard to like do things safe and compliant and also be cutting edge and leveraging all the new tech and stuff. So that's a lot of stuff I spend a time with my clients too. It's like, okay, you're going to get a new model every 3 months. It's going to want you to upgrade. How do you evaluate that as a step forward or step back? And so there's also tooling and stuff you got to invent around, like, if we turn this model on in production, what's going to happen to our usage and all that stuff. And so that's all the things that OpenAI is not thinking about. They'll just, like if you built something on GPT 3.5, you can't even use it anymore, right? Because they decided for you that they're not going to provide it. And so, like, people saw huge differences, especially for RAG scenarios and prompt-based scenarios. It just performs differently. When you're failing fast, you don't care about legacy stuff, but like how many machines out there are still running Windows 8? And how many servers are there, like NT servers sitting underneath the CTO's desk with information that you need to access and everything. So uh, anything goes in the enterprise, and you really got to understand like what's the life cycle of this stuff and how do I build lasting technology, how it work well.
Couldn't imagine in 2025 finally being approved to use 3.5. They just like killed it. You're like, thanks,
Yeah,
guys. This is awesome.
yeah. Well, and also that's kind of like the wrong way to think about it too with these models, because you should be approving the ability to use models and a process to evaluate models, and then the model update should be like a streamlined version of that process, right? Like, okay, we're going to then to benchmark, and we're not even going to talk to you about upgrading a new model until we could test this benchmark and thing at that, and then we have like a meeting of the council of elders to like look at the results and say, oh, this is it was 69% before, and now it's 72% before, and it costs this much more or less, and blah 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 blah. And then we go forward with it, and then we A/B test it and flag it in. And so you can reduce that from like 18 months down to 3 months, and then down to like 6 weeks or 4 weeks or whatever your process is. That's the way you got to do it, to stay current. And it's awesome. Like if a new model comes out, it's cheaper and it works better and all that, and it doesn't change any of my results for the negatives. Yeah, let's ship it. And I think like understanding what is your floor of quality is super important. Where you don't have to just believe OpenAI that the new model is better because they had a video that says it's better. You can test it and see it and decide for yourself, right?
Right. I think a great example of that right now is like the 4.1 model has been fine tuned to follow instructions better.
Yeah.
And in every use case, is that going to be the best model? No. But if you're seeing where, 4.0 mini or the other models aren't following your instructions, like might be worth it for you to try. And to your point, you need to know like what the model's improving upon, what is your expected outcome, and then try it out a few times to see like if it actually evaluates that, because they always cost more when the new ones come out for the most part. I'll put an asterisk there. But
Mm.
you're going to be paying more for potentially worse performance if it doesn't meet the exact use case that you want as well. So paying more for getting a worse outcome never typically goes well in the business world.
Well, and I think, yeah, well, yeah, except for like the last 2 years of tech, so like, uh, and I think that's like the number one lesson to me of things like DeepSeek, right? Is that I think the future is going to be a huge lattice of models, right? You're going to have your
Hmm.
model on your phone. You're going to have your model on the email server. You're going to have your model on your banking, and I think they're all going to be at various tuning. I think there's not going to be a general model that is running the world, right? And I think people need to get comfortable with that and understand, like, if I'm using a mix of my models and people's models and endpoint models, what is my evaluation system, and how do I like say, okay, I'm going to subscribe to OpenAI's models, provided they do these 5 things around like ethics and environmental safety and compliance and all that. And
Hmm.
when they fall below that rating, I switch over to someone else's model, right, dynamically. And I think that's going to be kind of like the future of it, where we will go back to like, okay, we're not going to have one model to rule them all. We're going to have thousands of things, and some of them will be based, and some of them will be based on machine learning and vision learning and whatever the best solution for the job is. So getting customers and clients used to that function of the future, it's like, okay, there's going to be, you're going to use Microsoft Copilot to write a document in Word, but it's going to talk to an agent built on something that's owned by Salesforce, right? Or something
Hmm.
that's owned by GitHub or whoever to do this specific job. And so your pricing will reflect that, so you won't have to use the most expensive model all the time just to like talk to the other models. I think you'll use probably like the best chat model to talk to the best, you know, uh, process automation model. I think so. Like when I need to understand of like, oh, I need to ship a package to the East Coast, the model will figure, okay, well, if you go with FedEx, they'll pick it up in 20 minutes and they'll be there so long. And on. All that kind of negotiation will happen outside the organization because you trust the mailing agent to do its work and do the best value and all that. That requires a lot of different gears to come together that you can't control and all that. All you can control is like who you agree to work with. Like it's like my grandma used to say this thing is like, how do you be, what's the best way to be street smart? Always say no. Like if you can't, if you don't say, so you start from that point of zero trust and then understand what makes trust for you, then that's kind of like how you set yourself for success. Where it's like, okay, it's going to be a weird couple of years. Yeah. And different technologies are going to do different things, and some are going to fail, and some and succeed. And you want to like de-risk yourself as much as you can, where you're getting value from these things and making things better for your employees and all that, without like paying to beta test, a startup's vision.
Yeah, I think that's might be a good closing thought there. Of always say no, really understand what you're doing, trying not to get basically taken advantage of, because that's what some of these startups are doing when they just spin up and put a facade on top of APIs that you or I could use today and charge an exorbitant premium. Like, just be cautiously optimistic, and I would say keep rolling with the punches, because we're in for, I think, more of the wild ride roller coaster, not less, unfortunately. But Peter, it's been great chatting with you. How do people stay up to date with you, see what you're doing, engage with you?
Yeah, the best way is at our website, peoplemakeitbetter.com. That's where you can find all about Toyleville and the services we offer. We do a weekly office hours where people can come and ask questions, get thoughts about projects that they're building. And of course, we do one-on-one consulting and workshop and training.
Awesome. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see everybody again next week.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everybody.